Okay, so hello guys, and welcome back to Bro Founders Talk from Temi, an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. As you can see, Russ, guys, we have a new guest on the show. We've got Christian Bason, CEO of the Danish Design Center, a government-backed non-profit foundation working to advance innovation and sustainable growth by design. Christian is also a university lecturer at Henley Business School, Copenhagen Business School, European School of Administration, among many, many others, and acts as an advisor to businesses and governments at home and globally. Quite a title there, Christian. Before we get started and going into the world of everything that you're doing at the Danish Design Center, I want to know a little bit about you, a little bit more about the man behind the screen, let's say. So tell me a fact, let's say, that not many people know about you.
Yeah, so a fact might be that when I was quite young, I wrote computer books. So I wrote a couple of books on programming, graphical programming and visual programming when I was 12, 13 years old.
Interesting.
So not a lot of people know that I have that aspect.
Interesting. So you were a tech guy right from the beginning.
Yes, exactly.
Very, very interesting. Okay, cool. Let's go into the world of what you're doing at the Danish Design Center. So tell me from the beginning, what was the mission when you started out?
Yeah, well, actually, when I arrived at the Danish Design Center in 2014, the organization had been around since 1978. So it was already by then an organization with quite a bit of history. Now, in Denmark, when I came in, there was a government strategy to combine architecture, design, creative industries in one physical building, which was not built yet. So my job was to basically sell the building that we owned in the heart of Copenhagen, across from the Tivoli Garden amusement park, and shut down the exhibition space we used to run, and then really pivot the organization towards something quite different that would be part of this new development, this new property in the heart of Copenhagen on the waterfront. But also to focus the Danish Design Center on design methods, design capacity, design for sustainability. So really make a strategic shift and, in a way, turn around the organization. So there was a bit of a task that I had back then in 2014 when I arrived.
How long did that take you, that task?
Longer than you might think, because there was quite a lot of structural change also in the design industry, or you could say the design support industry in Denmark. So we have a Copenhagen Fashion Week, we have a large design award called Index. We have quite a few different kind of fractured landscape of institutions that went different ways were getting public funding. And today we only have the Danish Design Center receiving public funding for advancing design. So that process of consolidating everything into a foundation, supporting those other organizations in finding their way. Now they all work as independent nonprofits. So that took a while. I would say that by the time we adopted our most recent strategy 3 years ago, the fall of the end of 2020, that was kind of when we said, okay, now we kind of arrived. Now we are the institution, the foundation that we want to be. We were also expanded to the western part of Denmark. So we have an office in Copenhagen. We also have an office in South Denmark region, which is kind of close to the one of the designing universities in Denmark. And in just having that geographic balance, in any country in the world, you always have these periphery and center dialogues, and we wanted to make sure we're also present in what you might call the Danish heartland.
I saw this. So when I was doing research about the company, obviously over 40 years of experience the company is now. That is obviously a long time for a company to go from how life was, how the industry was 40 years ago to how it is now. What has been the biggest kind of shift that you have noticed in the 8 years that you've been working for them? And what has been the biggest kind of technological kind of hook forward which you have tried to use since you've been there?
Yeah, so in terms of bigger shifts, you can say the mission has not changed. We're still advancing the power of design in the broadest of senses for competitiveness in business and for society at large. We were a pioneer already in the 1980s and 90s in putting the connection between design and innovation at the forefront, and and sort of understanding how design is much more than products or services. It's an approach to strategy and to change in companies. I would say on substance, the biggest change is the incredible focus right now, and I think going forward, on impact and on sustainability. So addressing global challenges through business, through the impact the business can have, but also, of course, through the impact that policy and the public sector can have, is a big shift. So it's there's always a mix now. There's no longer just working with how can design advance profits alone. It's always balanced with other types of value, sustainability in terms of climate change or green transition, environment, biodiversity, or sustainability in the social sense of sort of creating more social impact. It could be on healthcare, for example. So that's one shift. Now on technology, I would say, and this is also part of my my most recent book. I think I have it here. We can talk about that later maybe, but I wrote this book called Expand about the future of design that I published last year with a co-author. And one of the points we're making in that book around where design is heading is, of course, that technology is shifting to become, intelligent, and intelligence and AI is becoming pervasive in many ways. And of course, the connectedness of products and services is pervasive. And that raises new questions about who leads the future, right? Is it technology, or is it algorithms leading the way, or do we lead the way? I think that dilemma has always, in a way, been there with the tech revolution. Again, when I wrote my computer book in the early 1980s, there were people who were very afraid of using computers in education, for example. And so the dialogue between humans and computers and technology and what's going on there is still ongoing. But of course, it's at a different scale and level with the business of the internet and with now AI, right? So that's shifting and is shifting right as we speak.
Absolutely. I mean, compared to the first book which you would have written back in the day to how it is now, I mean, the fear factor of what was around technology is completely different, but everyone's much, well, we can't live without it now. Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine my life without it. It makes my life so much easier. And that's the advancement of technology. Tell me a little bit more about the three strategies, transformations that you have. So you've got the green, the digital, and the social. Tell me a little bit about these.
Right. So again, that's with our most recent strategy that we looked at the world around us and said, what are the big shifts, the big transitions happening globally? And to simplify it, we said, well, there's a very large and systemic transition around green, which means environment, biodiversity, climate change that we need to work on, and which is in a way not leaving any business untouched. So you have to relate. You have to relate because of European Union regulation. You have to relate because of customer demands. You have to relate because of even leaders and employees saying, well, what are we doing on the climate agenda? You need to change because of attracting and recruiting staff. So that's a large strategic shift that enterprises and the public sector need to go through. On digital, obviously, it's pervasive. It's everywhere. Design and digital go hand in hand in the sense that it's designers who make the decisions together with in startups or in corporates around what to build. And we have said when it comes to digital that we have to ask ourselves, how are we designing ethical solutions that are good for people, solutions that don't manipulate or steal their data or go against their best interests. So there's a big question about how do we create technology that serves people and not something else, while of course being sound business. And then the last part on the social, it's a huge area of interest for me as well. I've always, I'm originally a political scientist. I've always been very concerned with society at large. And on social, we see transitions in society. We see mental health becoming a huge challenge, not least during and post-COVID. We see young people suffering from, performance pressures and poor mental health. And we also have other social transitions happening in societies. We've had some major crises in our healthcare systems more generally that we need to address in terms of productivity, in terms of access, equality, and so on. Mm-hmm. And you can expand the social to all kinds of other, you could say, complex problems in society. We decided to focus on mental health as the main one on social, but for us, that transition could be many other types of challenges to focus on. And all those three, digital and green and social transitions, they're kind of what drives our emphasis on where can design and designers make a difference to business and to society.
With you, you're saying there obviously about mental health and the importance of it, and that's what you're driving forwards. Is this been one of the factors as to why you changed the the hierarchy system of the company? Because obviously you haven't got the hierarchy system anymore.
No,
you're saying that anyone can lead or anyone can follow. It's up to you. It depends on the circumstances. Is this one of the reasons for this?
It's not the main reason. The main reason we reorganized, and again, we did this 3 years ago also with our new strategy, was to say we want to be an organization that also, in terms of our organizational design, the way we are structured, the way we lead, the way we run the Danish Design Center, want to be on the forefront. Mm-hmm. And we were very inspired by books like Reinventing Organizations by Frederic Laloux, about teal organizations, books like Humanocracy by Gary Hamel and Mikhail Zanini from Harvard Business School on creating human organizations rather than bureaucracies. Mm-hmm. And we believe very strongly that if you take a starting point in a fundamental belief that human beings, that people want to do their best, that they want to help each other, that they want to take responsibility, that people can actually both lead and follow each other, then we had to take the consequence and build this radically self-managing, self-leading organization. Now, obviously, as you mentioned, there is an angle on that one, which is mental health or thriving, which is how do we create an organization where people thrive, where people can be creative, where they can be innovative, where it's good to be. So thriving and mental well-being is definitely part of the raison d'être behind that kind of organization. But so is enhancing productivity, so is really making an impact, so is understanding that if you want to be a force for good in the world, you also have to create a good organization.
Mm-hmm. Tell me, how big is the team? How big?
Yeah, so we're not that big. I mean, we're about 35, 40 people. So we are sort of a medium-sized. We grew from when I arrived, we were about 14. So we've been growing quite a bit since over the last 8 years. Obviously, since we're operating in a traditional market, we are kind of hybrid, right? So as an independent nonprofit, we're funded partly by the government, partly by projects, by working with foundations, working with European Union, and partly we also do, keynote talks. We do training and executive development, and on a market basis. So we kind of hybrid in terms of our revenue and income structure that way. But we wanted to be an organization that could kind of pave the way in demonstrating a very different kind of organizational design. And we are experiencing a very significant interest from business and other institutions in sort of that way of leading and that way of organizing. So that's kind of something we are also beginning to share and do some programs around with external partners.
I guess it's one of those things as well. When you've got a smaller team at the moment, you're always able to everything's able to be overseen a little bit better. The family feeling with the company is a lot more tighter. Tell me, how would the staff, how would your team describe the mission, what you're doing? How would they describe the team and the mission of what they're doing? What do you think?
I think they'll fundamentally say they work with discovering new ways where design can make an impact, and design meaning the in the broadest sense, the profession and the knowledge field of design. They would say that they're quite passionate about sustainability, that's kind of pervasive in much of the work we do. Mm-hmm. And then they would say that they are, I think, proud of the workplace they're part of, because we are quite radical in how we experiment and how we lead. So whether that is new ways of hiring people, whether that is new ways of organizing teams, whether that is even adapting our organization to our strategy, people shifting quite fluidly between tasks. So I would say that that's something that they think is significant to be part of that kind of organization.
We're going to talk a little bit about your role as a CEO and a leader as well. I want to know, firstly, before we go into kind of your background a little bit more and what you've learned, I want to know, how would you say that your team would describe you as a leader? What would be their words for your description as a leader?
Well, recently I turned 50 and we had a small party at work, and they did a lot of things that they thought were funny around my way of leading. So I think they would say that I have a lot of energy and passion around our work. I think they would say that I'm also always keeping myself and others busy. I would say that they see me as someone who's not very controlling, but would more set direction and inspire and engage and suggest ways we could do things, and then allowing entirely up to people how they want to do the work and how they move on from there. So, in a way, having quite a lot of trust in people and quite a lot of belief that under the right conditions, people can do their best. I think they will also say that I have too many ideas. So it's a bit dangerous having a meeting with me, because you go away with maybe more ideas than you need, or more input than you need. So I think also they would probably say that it would be nice if I slowed down a little bit sometimes, and if I was maybe also more available, because my calendar obviously is kind of pretty packed with meetings internally and externally. So not that much time of just hanging out. I like to think that they enjoy spending time with me, also sort of offline and sort of in casual situations when possible.
Tell me about where did this kind of ability to be able to lead come from? Not everyone has the ability to lead. Where did your ability and I guess your passion to lead actually come from? And how have you seen over the years it develop into where you are now to what you were then? Where's that come from?
In the year 2000, 2001, I worked in New York City for a year for a management consultancy I was part of. And had quite a lot of freedom that year to do different things, including take some continuing education. So I studied at NYU in New York and took a few courses, including a leadership class. And that leadership class was really an eye-opener for me. We had a very engaged teacher, and then we had a very sort of really, really good and interesting literature and sort of curriculum around this leadership course. And I discovered kind of what is leadership, as opposed to management. And I realized that was really, interesting. And so when I came back to Copenhagen after my stint in New York City, I kind of pursued opportunities to take on leadership roles, and within a year, I actually became a manager. I had a leadership position and led a team, and so that was the start. And I've been a leader ever since. So I've had leadership positions for the last more than about 20 years by now. Mm-hmm. And I think very foundational for me was not only getting some insight into theory and sort of literature, but also that consultancy that I was part of for about 8 years total was a way where you kind of, you're pretty young, you learn some leadership approaches, you learn about a way to be a business. And one of the things that I took with me that may be quite fundamental for how I lead today is that in that consultancy, our mantra was that the best argument wins, which means that you're running a meritocracy where it's not about your position. It's all about what's the good argument, who has the knowledge, who can provide most value to the client or to the outside world around you. And I've taken that with me in the sense that I've always been, of course, I work in organizations with lots of hierarchy. We even also create a hierarchy in the Danish Design Center. But being a project-based organization, being a sort of a task-oriented organization, what's really mattered to me, at least, has been how good are people, and how are they doing, and what's the quality of their thinking, and the quality of their acting, and the quality of the relationships. And now we've just taken the consequence and built an organization where that's all that matters, and where hierarchy and position and title matters very, very, very little, as I really truly believe it should. And so that's kind of my journey in terms of where I am today as a leader, and the kind of very trust-based, open approach I'm taking.
Interesting. So I actually read one of your articles before we spoke today, and it was about the changes in leadership, and it was talking about the wicked problems that we have these days as well. Tell me a little bit about this. So how has and how are we having to change in leadership now for the future, which is obviously involving more technology, more than it is the human part really in the past. It's more involving it in a hybrid kind of mix. Tell me about these wicked problems and how leadership is going to change.
Yeah. Well, so the notion of wicked problems, the idea that some problems, and especially those that are kind of societal, that are also political, those problems are highly interconnected. They are highly complex. They are actually so tricky that if you try to do something to the problem, something else and unexpected will probably happen. So when it comes to mental health, or it comes to climate change, or it comes to even ethics and technology, those are challenges or problems that have so many facets and so many interconnected parts that it's very hard to say where to start working on them, where to end. So that wicked complex nature of our problems has probably become more and more clear. As you know, since I was born, we've doubled the world's population. We have powerful computers in our pockets, whereas when I was born, having a microcomputer was a luxury or something that very few people could think of having. We are in a world where you have, still quite a lot of globalization, which means people can move around, and also people who can't move want to move. Mm-hmm. So you have migration flows, and that kind of pressure is also driven by, of course, climate change and conflict and crises. So you have a quite turbulent, quite complex world to deal with that arguably, and that's also the argument in my most recent book, requires a new level of thinking and a new level of leading. And so the traditional hierarchical, administrative, managerial ways of running organizations that we've inherited from the 20th century don't really cut it anymore. And we see organizations that are clinging to sort of those very controlling and very hierarchical ways of working are not being successful. Now, that goes for the liberal Western world, where we have a choice. Now, we also see other trends, right? That autocratic regimes can use digital and new technology to exert control over people and to project their control and power in new ways. So there's really, in a way, a battle where technology can be used for setting us free and giving us the ability to live good lives, the lives we want to live, or it can enslave us. It can enslave us both through autocracy and sort of misuse of technology in the interest of state power, for example. But I also do think that technology can enslave us by design, that we become so addicted to technology and to those that want to profit from us, that it's really not good for us. So even if you're a company that lives off technology and lives off selling more and more tech to people, you, I think, fundamentally have to ask yourself, are we doing more good than harm? Mm-hmm. How can we be responsible in this kind of complex world and understand better the impact that our technology is having on people's daily lives, on their mental health, on their sleep, on their work quality, on their productivity, and so on. So I think there's some big questions out there, and navigating that kind of complexity is the difficult leadership challenge of today.
Let's talk a little bit here, just a few more questions before we finish off. We're talking about AI and the challenges that it comes to. Before we go to the challenge of how you're going to see it develop, I want to know, what are you most impressed with AI over the last few years, which we can now use?
Yeah, again, so I grew up at a time when AI was something we could just kind of dream about, and where computers could kind of fake it in very simple ways. Back in the 80s. Now, today, it's not really faking it. It's actually quite significant, right? And it's not new as such, but I think what is significant and new is that it's now becoming democratized. So there is hardly anyone, at least that I know, that haven't played around with ChatGPT and tested and found out what it can do. The other day, we were planning a sort of a parents' dinner for our school, for our local school here, and we tried to use ChatGPT to do the planning. Now, it failed miserably in getting the groups right in terms of who goes to what dinner and so on. But just the fact that we have that as a resource and can experiment with. And in other cases, it works beautifully. I mean, in writing a short essay on something, some topic, it's actually quite well. And I think in some cases, you couldn't tell the difference between something written by a human and by the chat AI. So I think what's changed is basically the pervasiveness and the access. The access it's at your fingertips, and it's no longer just, Google Maps giving you a recommendation for something because it sees your patterns of movement and behavior. Now it's where you actively go in and you play with it and you use it and you try it out and you see how can this help me. And so that becomes a partner driven by the user. That's a very different story than it's something driven by big tech. that uses it to provide you with a better service experience. Now you are creating the experience yourself. So that's, I think, a sea change. And where that will lead us, I'm not so sure. That's why a lot of people are concerned, of course, as well. I think it's pretty exciting. And I've always been mostly an optimist when it comes to technology. But it's also, of course, some of the dialogues people are having with the chats, some of the reactions the AI is giving people is also a little bit cause for concern. We don't quite know where it's going to head and what it will start suggesting or maybe start doing.
It's very true. And what I found with obviously ChatGPT as well, a lot of people are using it now where it's amazing that we've got these advancements which make work so much quicker, so much more concise, probably a lot cheaper in many aspects because you're not needing to hire those specific people who would write these articles. However, it's making a lot of people use their brains less. So this kind of ability and skill to be able to critically think is no longer going to be a thing which is on the forefront, basically.
Maybe. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that will be the case. I mean, when the calculator came out in 70s and 80s, there was also a discussion on whether kids will ever learn to do math, right? And I think that has kind of been debunked. I think we see the calculator actually helped us in several ways and just allowed us to do math at a higher level. But it requires that teachers and schools made sure you did learn the basics before you then started using the calculator. So in the same way here, I think we need to learn the basics of interacting with the computers and technology before we then move on to working with AI. In principle, asking great questions, being highly intuitive and having imagination, having human creativity in the way in which you ask questions and give tasks to AI, play with it, work with it, I think could elevate our human ability to a even higher level than technology has done so far, if we do it the right way. So I don't think it's a given that we'll become enslaved by it, but I think it raises the bar on the quality of our humanness.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, tell me, where would you like to see Danish Design Center in 5 years' time from now? I know 5 years' time is a long way away, especially in the technological advancements right now. 2 years' time to 5 years' time, where would you want to be where you would say, I'm happy with where we are?
So when we adopted our strategy, we said green, digital, and social, right? And we said green will be circular economy primarily, digital will be around ethics and responsibility, and social will be mainly around mental health. Now, on the green transition, circular economy and that kind of whole business model around that space, that's where we've gone the furthest with the biggest alliances, the largest portfolio of projects. That's kind of where we've been moving fastest and broadest. My dream is that we will take our strategy so seriously that we're going to, in 3 to 5 years' time, be in a place where we are at a global level a significant contributor to the dialogue around ethics and responsibility in AI, in digital, and that we also have made a dent in an impact on mental health challenges both at home and abroad. So actually, I'm dreaming of an organization that is kind of moving in that direction. Whether I will be there or not, that's an open question. But I hope that we've set sort of the track and built the missions that they will basically have a life on their own, just like the organization has a life on its own.
And last question for you here, Christian. With obviously now in May, what has been the thing you're most happy about that you've achieved this year? And what have you not achieved this year, which is so far a little bit irritating, but you want to achieve? You've still obviously got, 7 months left? No, 6 months left.
7 months ago, yeah. So a few weeks ago, my latest book work got published, which actually reflects the journey of leadership around the redesign of our organization to a sort of a human-centered organization. So that just came out. This is the new one. It's in Danish so far. It says the organization was set free and the leadership had to be rediscovered. It'll come out in English as well within, I think, a year. So I'll be happy to come back on your session here with the new book. But that's a really happy thing to have that one out and have the story out and share that with us, with our ecosystem, with our partners, and of course with the colleagues as well who've been. Without them, we couldn't really have redesigned the organization. What we haven't achieved or where we are now, I think I can see that on the discussion we just had on AI and on where this is heading, I feel a sense of urgency that now this is truly exploding in terms of how people are engaging with ChatGPT and other sort of conversational or generative AI tools. And I feel we have to sort of leapfrog that a little bit and invite it into that conversation in a more significant way than we have. So I think that's kind of a matter of urgency where we haven't gone far enough in our work. We have a toolkit out there about ethics and digital, but we need to do more. So that's kind of where I feel now is the time, because everybody's discussing it.
Nice. Christian, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure to speak to you. And I hope in a year's time, once that book is translated, we'll meet again and we'll speak more about the Danish Design Center. Cool.